My quiet life as Anya, the courthouse janitor, was a carefully built lie. A single, arrogant slap was all it took to tear it down and unleash the commander I used to be. The smell of lemon-scented ammonia and old wood is a smell I've come to associate with peace. For 2 years, it's been my world. The squeak of my mop bucket's wheels, the rhythmic slosh of water, the satisfying way a polished floor reflects the fluorescent lights above. It's simple, it's honest, and most importantly, it's anonymous. In the sprawling, marble-halled county courthouse, I was just Anya, the janitor, a ghost in a gray jumpsuit, wiping away the grime left by other people's messy lives. It was a far cry from my old life, where the grime was blood and the dust was from deserts half a world away. But I chose this. I needed this. The quiet, the invisibility. It was a balm on a soul scorched by years of command. My routine was precise, almost meditative. I'd start on the 3rd floor and work my way down, finishing with the main courtrooms on the 1st floor after hours. But that day, things were running late. A high-profile case, the kind that gets the local news vultures circling, had pushed everything back. It was Judge Albright's courtroom, courtroom 1A. She was a no-nonsense woman with eyes that could freeze boiling water, and she didn't suffer fools. Which is why the man on the witness stand was sweating so profusely. His name was Officer Rourke. I knew the type. I'd seen them all over the world. Men who confused authority with power, who wore their uniform like a crown and saw everyone else as a subject. He had a thick neck, a swagger in his step, and a smirk that never quite left his lips, even when he was swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I'd been mopping the hallway outside and had seen him strut in earlier, clapping his partner on the back. He'd barely glanced at me, his eyes sliding over me as if I were a piece of furniture. It was a look I was used to, and one I cultivated. Invisible, unseen, unthreatening. The case involved a young black kid, Jamal, who Rourke had pulled over for a broken taillight and ended up arresting on a laundry list of charges, including assaulting an officer. The kid looked terrified, barely 20 years old, sitting beside a harried-looking public defender. From my position, quietly cleaning the brass fixtures at the back of the courtroom, I could see the whole theater play out. Rourke's testimony was a masterclass in embellished heroism. He painted Jamal as a violent thug, a monster who had lunged at him with a crazed look in his eyes. The public defender, a young woman with fire in her eyes, was methodically dismantling his story. "Officer Rourke, you state in your report that my client lunged at you, but your own body cam footage shows him with his hands raised, correct?" Rourke's jaw tightened. "The footage doesn't capture the entire incident. He was being belligerent." "He was asking why he was being arrested, wasn't he?" she pressed. "In the video, we can hear him saying, 'I haven't done anything wrong, sir.' Is that what you consider belligerent?" With every question, Rourke's polished veneer cracked a little more. His face reddened. He shifted in his seat, gripping the edge of the witness box. His eyes kept flicking towards Jamal, and the look in them was pure venom. It was a look I recognized all too well. It wasn't about justice. It was about dominance. It was about putting someone he deemed lesser in their place. I felt that old familiar tension coil in my gut, the instinct to analyze threat vectors, to map out the room. I forced it down, focusing on the scuff marks on the floor. "You're Anya the janitor," I reminded myself. Just the janitor. Finally, Judge Albright had heard enough. "We'll take a 15-minute recess," she declared, banging her gavel. Rourke practically leaped from the stand, his face a mask of thunder. Lawyers began shuffling papers, and Jamal's public defender gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. I saw my chance to do a quick spot clean near the prosecution's table where someone had spilled a bit of water. I grabbed my mop and bucket, keeping my head down, my movements economical and quiet. Stay invisible. That was the mission. As I was mopping up the small puddle, Rourke came storming past. He was muttering under his breath, his fists clenched. He was headed right for me. I angled my body slightly to give him a wider path, the way you'd move for a charging bull. But he didn't alter his course. Instead of walking around me, he walked straight into me, his shoulder slamming into mine and knocking me off balance. I stumbled, catching myself on the edge of a table. The mop clattered to the floor. "Watch where you're going," he snarled, his voice low and menacing. His breath smelled of stale coffee and rage. I didn't say a word. I just bent down to pick up my mop. Eye contact was a challenge, and I wasn't interested in issuing one. I just wanted to disappear. "What, you deaf?" he spat, stepping closer. The courtroom had quieted. I could feel eyes on us. The public defender, the bailiffs, even Judge Albright, who was still on her bench watching. "I'm talking to you." I straightened up slowly, still not looking at him. "Sorry, officer. My mistake." My voice was quiet, deferential. The voice of Anya, the janitor. He wasn't finished. He took another step, invading my personal space, forcing me to look up. His face was inches from mine, his eyes blazing with a misplaced fury, meant for the defense attorney, for Jamal, for the judge, for anyone who had dared to question him. But I was the only one here. A safe target. "You people are always in the way," he hissed, his lip curling in a sneer. Useless. The word people hung in the air, thick and ugly. Everyone knew what he meant. I saw the public defender's eyes widen. I saw one of the bailiffs shift his weight uncomfortably. But no one moved. No one spoke. And in that frozen moment, as his hatred washed over me, all I wanted was to finish my job and get out of his orbit. I made to step aside, to just let him pass, to de-escalate and vanish, but he read my movement as disrespect, as an attempt to flee his authority. "I'm not done with you," he growled. Then his arm shot out. It wasn't a punch. It was something worse, more degrading. It was a backhand, fast and contemptuous, thrown with the casual malice of a man swatting a fly. The sound of his leather glove connecting with my cheek was like a gunshot in the silent courtroom. The force of it snapped my head to the side. A sharp, stinging pain bloomed across my skin. For a split second there was only the shock of the impact, the smell of his cheap cologne, and the stunned silence of a dozen witnesses. He stood there, a triumphant sneer on his face, puffing out his chest, having just asserted his dominance over the cleaning lady. He had no idea that he hadn't just slapped a janitor. He had just broken a cage that had taken me 2 years to build. As the sting receded, it was replaced by an icy calm that washed through my veins. The world sharpened. The ambient noise of the room faded into a dull hum. I could feel my heart rate steady, my breathing deepen. I slowly turned my head back to face him, and for the first time, I let him see what was behind my eyes. The janitor was gone. Commander Clark was now present, and he was about to learn the profound difference between authority and power. The stinging on my cheek was a distant signal, an input of data to be processed and filed away. Pain is a useful tool. It tells you where you've been damaged. But fear, panic, surprise, those are luxuries a commander cannot afford. In the fraction of a second after his glove made contact, my old life came rushing back not as a memory, but as pure, instinctual programming. The courtroom wasn't a room anymore. It was a tactical environment. Threat assessment. One primary hostile, Officer Rourke. Male, approximately 6'1", 220 pounds. He's running on ego and adrenaline, making him predictable. His right hand is his weapon. It's still raised slightly, post-strike. His center of gravity is high. His stance is wide, but unstable. He's off balance. Secondary threats. 2 bailiffs. One by the jury box, one near the judge's bench. Both are armed, but their hands are not on their weapons. They are stunned, watching. Their reaction time will be slow. The judge, the lawyers, the kid Jamal, they are non-combatants. The exits are behind me and to my left. My mop is on the floor, a potential improvised weapon, 5 feet of hardwood. Not necessary. Not yet. I let my eyes meet his. The meek, downcast gaze of the janitor was gone. I let him see the abyss, the cold, calculating stillness of someone who had decided the fates of men far more dangerous than him before breakfast. The change in my demeanor was so abrupt it was like a physical blow. I saw it register in his eyes. The triumphant sneer faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then a flash of animal fear. He had been expecting tears, or a cringe. He was getting a predator. "You made a mistake, officer," I said. My voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it cut through the silence of the room with absolute authority. It was the voice I used to give orders that would not be questioned. His confusion hardened back into rage. He was a bully, and bullies double down when their intimidation fails. "What did you say to me?" he roared, and he reached for me again, his big hand grabbing for the collar of my jumpsuit. It was the last mistake he would be allowed to make. His forward momentum was a gift. As his fingers brushed the fabric of my collar, I didn't pull back. I moved in, closing the distance flowing under his grasping arm. My left hand clamped down on his right wrist, my thumb finding the pressure point over the radial nerve with practiced precision. A jolt like an electric shock shot up his arm, his fingers spasming open involuntarily. Simultaneously, my right hand came up under his elbow joint. I didn't break his arm. I simply disassembled it. With a slight pivot of my hips using his own weight and momentum against him, I hyperextended his elbow in the wrong direction. There was a sickening wet pop, a sound of cartilage and ligament giving way. A strangled scream tore from Rourke's throat as his arm was forced into an impossible angle. But I wasn't done. Maintaining my grip on his wrist, I continued the rotation, dropping my own center of gravity and sweeping his leg out from under him. He crashed to the marble floor like a felled tree. The sound echoed in the cavernous room. I ended the movement with my knee pressed firmly into the back of his neck. His one good arm twisted up behind his back in a compliance hold that had him grunting in agony, his face pressed against the floor I had just mopped. The entire sequence, from his grab to his impact with the floor, took less than 2 seconds. It was fluid, efficient, and brutally final. Silence. A deep, profound, absolute silence filled the courtroom. Then, chaos. "On the ground! Now!" one of the bailiffs shouted, his voice cracking with adrenaline. I heard the click-clack of his sidearm being drawn from its holster. I didn't even look at him. My eyes were on Judge Albright. She was on her feet, her mouth slightly agape, her gavel clutched in her hand like a weapon. Her expression wasn't fear or anger. It was sheer, unadulterated shock. "Ma'am," I said, "get on the ground." The bailiff yelled again, his partner echoing him. 2 guns were now pointed at the back of my head. Rourke was whimpering beneath me, a pathetic sound. "My arm. You broke my arm." "I did not," I stated, my voice still level, my knee still firmly planted. "I dislocated it. It can be put back. Consider it a lesson in respecting boundaries. Bailiffs!" Judge Albright's voice cracked like a whip, silencing everyone. It was the voice of command, a voice I understood. "Stand down, both of you." "But, Your Honor, she—" I said, "Stand down," the judge repeated, her eyes locked on me. I saw the whole thing. He struck her first, unprovoked. Slowly, hesitantly, I heard the sound of the pistols being reholstered. I remained in position, my knee a point of immovable pressure on Rourke's neck. The situation was contained, but far from over. I had just assaulted a police officer, albeit in self-defense, in a crowded courtroom. My quiet life was over. Judge Albright walked down from her bench, her black robe swishing around her. She stopped a few feet away, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of the scene. The massive cop, neutralized on the floor, and me, the janitor, in complete and total control. She looked from Rourke's agonized face to my calm one. "Ma'am," she said, her voice laced with a bewildered respect. "In all my years on this bench I've never seen anything like that. Who in God's name are you?" Before I could answer, a voice came from the prosecutor's table. It was the DA, a man named Davies. He'd been staring at me, a pale, horrified look of recognition slowly dawning on his face. He was shuffling through some papers on his desk, his hands trembling. He pulled out a file, looked at a photo stapled to the inside, and then back up at me. He spoke in a choked whisper, but in the dead silent room it sounded like a scream. "Your Honor, I know her. We were briefed on her unit 2 years ago during that intelligence hearing on Afghanistan." Davies looked at Judge Albright, then at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. "That's not a janitor," he breathed. "That's Colonel Anya Clark. She was the commanding officer of the JSOC unit they called the Ghosts. Task Force Talon." The name fell into the courtroom like a grenade, and the silence it left in its wake was more profound than before. Task Force Talon. Colonel Anya Clark. The words meant nothing to most people in the room, but to the few who understood, it changed everything. The bailiffs who had moments ago been pointing guns at me now looked like they'd seen an actual ghost. Their hands hovered near their sidearms, not in aggression, but in a kind of nervous uncertainty. They weren't looking at a janitor who had snapped. They were looking at a legend, a boogeyman from classified military briefings, inexplicably mopping their floors. D.A. Davies was still pale, staring at me as if I might dematerialize. They said she retired, dropped off the grid completely. Judge Albright's gaze on me intensified. The shock was still there, but now it was layered with a deep, penetrating curiosity. She looked at the whimpering 6'1" cop pinned effortlessly under the knee of a 5'8" woman in a gray jumpsuit, and the impossible scene suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. "Colonel Clark," she said, testing the name. It felt foreign on her tongue, and even more so in my own ears. I hadn't been Colonel Clark in 2 years. I had been Anya. Just Anya. Is this true? I eased the pressure on Rourke's neck slightly, never taking my eyes off the judge. I'm the janitor, Your Honor. Anya is fine. The answer was a deflection, but not a denial. Rourke, hearing the shift in the room's power dynamic, tried to leverage it. She's insane, assaulting an officer. Your Honor, arrest her, he gasped, his face still mashed against the cool marble. I applied a subtle twist to his captured arm. A fresh wave of agony silenced him, reducing his protest to a choked whimper. I hadn't lost control. This was a demonstration of it. A clear, non-verbal communication to everyone in the room. This situation is exactly as I want it to be. That's enough, Judge Albright said, her voice firm. Her eyes weren't on Rourke. They were on me. Let him up, Colonel. It was an order, but her tone made it a request. I held my position for a moment longer, ensuring the message had been received by all parties. Then, with the same fluid efficiency I'd used to take him down, I released him. I stood up, stepping back to create space. Rourke scrambled away from me like a crab, clutching his ruined arm, his face a mess of pain, fury, and utter humiliation. His partner rushed to his side, helping him to his feet. Rourke's eyes, full of hate, locked onto mine. The bully had been publicly and comprehensively dismantled. That kind of wound festers. He was no longer just a threat. He was an enemy. Bailiffs escort Officer Rourke to the infirmary to have his arm attended to, Judge Albright commanded. Then escort him to a holding cell. What? Rourke shrieked, his voice cracking. Me? In a holding cell? She's the one who attacked me. Officer Rourke, the judge's voice dropped to a glacial temperature. I watched you, an on-duty officer in my courtroom, strike a civilian without provocation. Then I watched that civilian defend herself. Right now, the only crime I am certain I witnessed was committed by you. Now get out of my sight before I add contempt of court to your growing list of problems. Rourke's face purpled with rage, but the sight of the two bailiffs approaching, their expressions unreadable but resolute, finally broke his defiance. He allowed himself to be led away, shooting one last venomous glare over his shoulder at me. As he disappeared through the double doors, the room seemed to exhale. Now all eyes were on me. The janitor who was not a janitor. The ghost in the machine. I felt exposed, the comfortable cloak of my anonymity stripped away. I could feel the weight of my past settling back onto my shoulders. Judge Albright walked towards me, stopping a few feet away. She looked me up and down, from my worn-out work boots to the faint red mark blossoming on my cheek. Colonel Clark, she said, her voice softer now. I think you and I need to have a conversation, in my chambers. Now. She turned to the public defender, who was looking at me with a mixture of awe and fear. Counselor, take your client. All charges against Mr. Jamal Washington are dismissed, with prejudice. It seems Officer Rourke has a severe credibility problem. Jamal, the young man at the center of it all, stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and dawning gratitude. He looked like he wanted to say something, but his lawyer wisely guided him out of the courtroom. I was alone with Judge Albright, D.A. Davies, and one remaining bailiff. The air was thick with unanswered questions. I just stood there, my hands empty, my mop lying forgotten on the floor. For 2 years my world had been simple. Dirt, water, and wax. Now it was once again a world of consequences, of titles and reputations, of violence and its aftermath. The judge led the way to the heavy oak doors behind her bench. Her chambers were just as you'd expect. Walls lined with law books, a large mahogany desk, and a commanding view of the city square. She gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs facing her desk. D.A. Davies followed us in, closing the door behind him, looking like a man who had just been asked to sit down with a loaded bomb. Judge Albright sat behind her desk, folded her hands, and leveled a gaze at me that I suspect had made hardened criminals confess on the spot. All right, Colonel. I want you to tell me exactly what a highly decorated Special Operations Commander is doing scrubbing floors in my courthouse. I took a breath. The truth was complicated, a tangled mess of burnout, trauma, and a desperate need for silence. I retired, Judge. I just wanted a quiet life. A quiet life? Davies piped up, his voice still shaky. Colonel, you were a legend. They called your unit the Scalpels of JSOC. You dismantled entire terror cells in a single night. People like you don't just retire to become janitors. Before I could respond, the intercom on the judge's desk buzzed sharply. She pressed the button, her eyes never leaving mine. Yes, Martha? Her clerk's voice came through, tinny and laced with panic. Your Honor, you need to see this. Chief Miller from the 17th Precinct is here. He's with a dozen of his officers. They're in the main lobby. The judge's brow furrowed. The 17th precinct. Rourke's precinct. The clerk's voice dropped to a terrified whisper. Your Honor, they're not asking to see you. They have a warrant. It's for Anya Clark, for the assault of a police officer and attempted murder. Attempted murder. The words hung in the air of the judge's chambers, so absurd, so grossly disproportionate to what had happened, that for a moment I thought I'd misheard. But the panic tone in her clerk's voice was unmistakable. Rourke hadn't just licked his wounds, he'd gone to his pack. He'd twisted the narrative, escalated the stakes to a level that was no longer about a courtroom scuffle. It was about retaliation. It was the blue wall closing ranks to crush someone who had dared to humiliate one of their own. Judge Albright's expression hardened from curiosity into a cold, controlled fury. On what grounds, Martha? She demanded into the intercom. The warrant claims the officer's life was in danger, the clerk stammered. It alleges advanced and lethal martial techniques were used with intent to kill. It's signed by Judge Miller. Miller! Judge Albright spat the name like it was poison. Of course it's Miller. He and Chief Evans play golf together every Thursday. She released the intercom button, and her piercing gaze fell on me. They're not just coming for you, Colonel. They're staging an insurrection in my courthouse. This is a message. D.A. Davies looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Attempted murder? That's insane. I was there. We were all there. It was a clear-cut case of self-defense after he assaulted her. It doesn't matter what we saw, Judge Albright countered, her voice dangerously calm. They have a warrant signed by a sitting judge. They think they can roll in here, put you in cuffs, and bury you under a mountain of paperwork and perjured testimony. They're counting on the fact that janitor versus decorated cop is an easy story to sell. They just don't know who they're dealing with. She looked at me. But I have a feeling they're about to find out. The old instincts, the ones I had tried so hard to bury under layers of ammonia and routine, were now singing in my veins. My mind was a flurry of calculations. 12 officers in the main lobby. That's the first floor. We're on the second. They'll likely send a 4-man team up the main stairs, maybe 2, to cover the elevator. They'll see this as a simple snatch and grab of a middle-aged woman. They'll be arrogant, complacent. That was their weakness. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady. They won't take me. It wasn't a plea or a boast. It was a statement of fact. I had not survived a decade of running black ops in the most hostile places on earth to be taken down by a pack of angry patrolmen in a county courthouse. The judge studied my face, seeing not a defendant, but a fellow commander assessing a hostile theater. I don't intend to let them, she said. But we have to play this smart. If you resist, they'll use it as justification. They'll say you were violent, that you proved their case for them. We need to dismantle their entire narrative before they can even lay a hand on you. She stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. I could see the flashing lights of at least half a dozen squad cars painting the buildings across the square in strobes of red and blue. This was a show of force, a public spectacle. Davies, the judge said, her back still to us. Get on the phone with the Attorney General's office, the state AG, not the federal. Tell them I have an active situation involving a decorated Special Forces veteran being illegally targeted by the 17th precinct on federal property. Use the words abuse of power and potential civil rights violation. Get me Assistant AG Peterson on the line. He owes me a favor. Davies, galvanized by a direct order, scrambled for his phone, his hands fumbling with the screen. The judge turned back to me. Colonel, they think you're trapped in here with them. The truth is they're trapped in here with you. But I can't have a firefight in my courthouse. I need your word you'll let the law handle this, provided I can keep them from putting you in chains. I met her gaze. She was offering me a way out that wasn't through a hail of bullets. She was offering me a shield, so I wouldn't have to become a sword. You have my word, Judge. I will not initiate hostilities. Good, she nodded, a plan clearly forming behind her eyes, because we are going to give them a very different story to sell. She walked to a closet in the corner of her chambers and pulled out a spare set of her judicial robes. She threw the heavy black fabric onto the desk in front of me. Put this on, she commanded. I looked from the robe to her, confused. Your Honor? They're coming for Anya Clark, the janitor, she said, a grim smile touching her lips. They're not expecting to be met by a legal attaché to this court. We are going to walk out that door, and you are going to be by my side. They will not touch you when you are under the direct protection of a superior court judge. It would be an act of war against the entire judicial branch. It was a brilliant, audacious plan. It used their own reverence for procedure and symbolism against them. A janitor in a jumpsuit is a target. A woman in judicial robes is an untouchable symbol of the law they claim to serve. I shed my gray jumpsuit, the anonymous skin I had worn for 2 years, and pulled the heavy robe over my clothes. The fabric was cool and formal, a different kind of uniform, but a uniform nonetheless. Just as I finished, the heavy oak doors to the chamber burst open, not with a knock, but with the force of a battering ram. Chief Evans of the 17th Precinct stood there, a big, florid man with a chest full of medals and a face full of self-importance. Behind him were 4 of his officers, hands on their holstered weapons, eyes scanning the room for their target. Their eyes landed on me. They saw a woman standing beside the judge, cloaked in the authority of the court itself. The confident, aggressive expressions on their faces faltered, replaced by confusion. This wasn't the scene they'd expected. "Chief Evans," Judge Albright said, her voice dripping with ice, "what is the meaning of this? You are in my private chambers, and I can assure you, you were not invited." Evans puffed out his chest, holding up the warrant like a holy text. "Judge Albright, I have a warrant for the arrest of one Anya Clark for the attempted murder of Officer Rourke. We have reliable information she's in here. We will be taking her into custody." "You will be doing no such thing," the judge replied, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with me. "First, this warrant is a piece of fiction, and Judge Miller will be answering for it in a judicial conduct review before the sun sets. Second," she placed a protective hand on my arm, "this is my legal counsel, and as an officer of this court, she enjoys judicial immunity while within the confines of this building. You will not lay a hand on her." The chief's face went from red to purple. He was being outmaneuvered, his show of force rendered impotent by a power greater than his own. He stared at me, the janitor he'd come to arrest, now wrapped in the impenetrable armor of the law. He knew he was beaten, but his pride wouldn't let him back down gracefully. "That's a cute trick, Judge," he sneered. "But it won't hold up. That warrant is valid. I'm going to have my men secure the exits. Sooner or later, your counsel has to leave the building, and when she does, she's mine." He turned on his heel to leave, but I spoke for the first time, my voice calm and clear. "You're making a mistake, Chief." He stopped, turning back slowly, a look of contempt on his face. "And who are you to tell me about mistakes?" "I'm the person you're trying to frame for attempted murder," I said, taking a step forward, out from behind the judge's shadow. "And I think it's only fair that you, and the DA, and the judge see exactly what your officer is claiming was a lethal attack." DA Davies looked up from his phone. "What are you talking about?" "The courthouse," I said, my gaze sweeping the room, "is wired. Cameras everywhere, lobby, hallways, even the courtrooms. They're for security, and they're always recording." I looked directly into Chief Evans's eyes, letting a cold smile touch my lips. "So why don't we just roll the tape?" The moment the words "roll the tape" left my lips, the atmosphere in the chambers shifted from a tense standoff to a strategic checkmate. Chief Evans's bravado evaporated, replaced by a pallor that made his florid face look pasty and sick. He was a bully and a blusterer, used to his authority being absolute. The idea of objective, irrefutable evidence being brought into play was a scenario he clearly hadn't prepared for. He had come with force, expecting to overwhelm a simple janitor. He was now facing a colonel, backed by a judge, who was about to use his own system against him. "Cameras?" he stammered, his eyes darting around as if he could see the lenses watching him. "The courtroom cameras are only for the official record. They're not." "Not those cameras, Chief," Judge Albright interjected, her voice sharp as broken glass. "She's talking about the building's security system. High definition, multiple angles, and archived on a secure server in the courthouse basement. My clerk is pulling the footage as we speak." She gestured to the intercom on her desk, a silent, menacing promise. The chief looked trapped. The 4 officers behind him shifted uncomfortably, their confident postures deflating as they began to realize they were pawns in a very, very bad game. They weren't here to uphold the law, they were here as muscle for a cover-up. DA Davies, seeing his opportunity, stepped forward, his earlier fear replaced by prosecutorial zeal. "Chief Evans, I'd advise you to think very carefully about your next move. I've just been on the phone with the Assistant Attorney General's office. They are keenly interested in this situation. A warrant based on a false report, executed with a show of force that borders on intimidation of a judicial officer? That's not just a problem for Officer Rourke. That's a career-ending catastrophe for you." Every word was a nail in the coffin of the chief's power play. He had come to make a statement, to protect his own, and show the world what happens when you cross the 17th precinct. Now, he was the one being cornered, outmaneuvered not by force, but by a truth he couldn't bully his way out of. As if on cue, The intercom buzzed. Judge Albright pressed the button. "Yes, Martha?" "I have it, Your Honor," her clerk's voice said, crisp and clear. "The footage from camera C1A4. It has a perfect view of the entire incident, crystal clear. I can stream it to the monitor in your chambers." "Do it," the judge ordered. A large monitor on the wall that usually displayed legal dockets flickered to life. The image was high-angle, black and white, but incredibly detailed. There we were. Me, mopping the floor. Officer Rourke, storming past. The deliberate, aggressive shoulder check. His snarling words, his face contorted in rage. And then, the slap. Fast, contemptuous, and utterly unprovoked. The screen captured my momentary shock, then the cold calm that settled over me, and then, in fluid, economical motion, the disassembly of Officer Rourke. It was exactly as I remembered, a textbook application of defensive force against an active threat. There was no malice, no lethal intent, just a perfect, controlled neutralization of an attacker. The video didn't show an attempted murder. It showed a highly skilled professional defending herself. We all watched in silence. When the clip ended, the image of Rourke whimpering on the floor, frozen on the screen. Judge Albright turned her gaze back to the chief. It was a gaze that could melt steel. "Attempted murder, you said?" she asked, her voice dangerously soft. "Chief, what I see here is felony assault by one of your officers, followed by what will likely be the most justified and cleanly executed self-defense claim I have ever witnessed. And what I have in my chambers is a conspiracy to file a false report and intimidate a federal court. So, you have two choices. You can order your men to stand down, tear up that pathetic excuse for a warrant, and go back to your precinct to await a visit from the AG's investigators. Or you can try to arrest my counsel, and we can all find out what a federal obstruction of justice charge feels like. The choice is yours." Chief Evans stood there, his chest rising and falling, the warrant in his hand now looking like a losing lottery ticket. He looked at the screen. He looked at me, no longer seeing a janitor, but seeing the calm, capable woman from the video. He looked at the unyielding face of the judge. The fight was over. He had lost. Without another word, he crumpled the warrant in his fist, turned, and stormed out of the chambers. His 4 officers, their faces a mixture of relief and embarrassment, followed him like beaten dogs. The sound of their footsteps retreating down the marble hallway was the sweetest sound I had heard all day. When they were gone, a heavy silence settled in the room. I slowly took off the judge's robe and folded it carefully, placing it on her desk. The borrowed power was no longer necessary. "Thank you, Your Honor," I said, my voice filled with a gratitude I hadn't felt in years. "Don't thank me, Colonel," she replied, a faint smile on her lips. "I should be thanking you. You exposed a rot in my city's police force that I've long suspected but could never prove. Officer Rourke is finished. His testimony against that young man, Jamal, is worthless. Every case he's ever been the primary witness on is now subject to review. You didn't just save yourself. You may have just saved dozens of innocent people." D.A. Davies cleared his throat. "The AG's office is launching a full investigation into the 17th Precinct's practices. Chief Evans will be suspended, pending the outcome. This goes far beyond just Rourke." He looked at me, a newfound respect in his eyes. "Colonel Clark, if you ever want a job as an investigator for the DA's office, the offer is open." I shook my head, a genuine smile forming on my face. "Thank you, Mr. Davies, but I think I'm done with that line of work." I looked at my gray jumpsuit, lying discarded on the floor. My life as Anya the janitor, the ghost of the courthouse, was over. But that didn't mean I had to become Colonel Clark again. Judge Albright came around from behind her desk. "What will you do now?" I thought for a moment, the future an open road for the first time in years. "I don't know," I admitted. "For 2 years I've just been cleaning up other people's messes. Maybe it's time I start building something of my own." The quiet life I had sought was gone, shattered by the crack of a glove against my cheek. But in its place was something else, a sense of purpose I hadn't realized I'd lost. I hadn't been hiding in that jumpsuit. I had been healing. And today I realized the healing was done. As I walked out of the judge's chambers, the courthouse felt different. The lawyers and clerks in the hallways no longer saw a ghost. They saw me. They whispered. They stared. But it was with a look of awe, not pity or ignorance. I walked down the grand marble staircase, past the spot where Rourke had assaulted me, and out the massive front doors into the afternoon sun. The squad cars were gone. The circus had left town. It was just another day in the city. But for me, it was the first day of a new life. A life where I didn't have to be invisible to be at peace. I was no longer Colonel Clark, the weapon, nor was I Anya, the shadow. I was just myself, finally free. And as I walked away from the courthouse, I didn't look back.